Okay, and I'd like to remind you that for more Microsoft webcasts, you can go to microsoft.com/webcast. And thanks again for joining us for today's MSDN webcast, Project 2010 Solution Starters, Drill Down and Code Walkthrough, Part 1 of 4. And now it's my pleasure to turn the floor over to our presenter today, Mike Shagru. Mike, you now have the floor.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be covering some Project 2010 Solution Starters here in depth. On the slide here, you can see that I have a list of the solution starters that we'll be covering in the next, well, in this session and the next 3 sessions. So a total of 4 sessions covering all the different web parts. Today we're going to cover the bulk edit tool and the bulk import tool. So I just want to remind everybody before we get going that today is definitely developer focused. There'll be only a very few slides just to sort of cover some high-level details, and then it's pretty much going to be almost all code walkthroughs and demos, looking at C#, maybe a little PowerShell, Visual Studio, JavaScript, all those good things. So if that's not your area of focus or interest, this is definitely not a webcast for you. So let me get right into here. The first one we're going to look at today is the bulk edit tool. This provides us an easy way to modify data on multiple projects. So for those of you that are familiar with Project Server in the past, if you've got a large portfolio of projects, say dozens or hundreds or even thousands of projects, each project might have custom fields or other types of fields that you want to change. And it's pretty easy to do it one at a time, opening and closing projects and making changes. But people have noticed in the past when you want to make some kind of a bulk edit sort of all at once, it's kind of difficult, kind of cumbersome. So I think that was the genesis for this bulk edit tool. Great way to go ahead and edit lots of different projects in a pretty efficient and fast manner. And the great thing about this is from a developer's perspective, there's some great highlights in here, some things that if you look at this sample code or the solution starter and see how this stuff works, you can use it, and you can make other customizations within your Project Server deployment. So some of the cool things it does is we changed the PWA ribbon, which is new in 2010. We also have some cool stuff that we're doing in JavaScript with some dialogues and with something called the JS Grid, which is a JavaScript grid that allows us to display all this information in a grid, sort of like Excel in the web page. And then we're also going to be doing some PSI calls in here. So for those of you that are, again, used to Project Server development, that'll be nothing new. But all of that gets integrated into this bulk edit tool to make for a pretty slick solution starter. So let me switch over to my VM, and first thing I want to do is go ahead and deploy this thing. And I just run through this. These all come with both PowerShell and BAT files that do the deployment. I just want to go ahead and show you this one quickly. So let's do this edit. Into deployment, and let me pull this up inside of PowerShell. And I've gone ahead and just hardwired the parameters into this thing just to make it a little bit faster and easier. But this is a nice a template, I think, for people if you want to start with a PowerShell script to do your deployment in a production environment. This is a great sample. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and then I'll just step through it quickly and mention some of the things in the script. So you can see here in the top screen with the red and blue text, that's the actual PowerShell script. You can see in the middle screen, there's some stuff happening here. It gave us some messages, and it basically retracted any previous solution that might have been put out there, removed it from the farm, and then we basically added back our WSP. So that's what's doing right now. It's just finished. Pretty much simple as that. If you look in the code here, at the top, I wired up the the first four parameters are what you basically would pass in as args typically to make this somewhat generic, but I just wired them in to make this easy. So then you can see here the next step we added the SharePoint PowerShell snap-in. So what that does is in PowerShell it's sort of an empty slate, if you will, and you need to have the snap-in added into your PowerShell session that provides you with the commandlets that provide all the functionality here to run these SharePoint scripts. So you need to run that first. Once it's been run, if I were to run this again, this would throw an error and say it's already added. So it's just a one-time shot in PowerShell. You have to make sure that's added, or you can run the PowerShell down here on this machine anyway. On this installation, there's a PowerShell shell that already has this loaded. So anyway, on to the next thing. You can see here how to we call this commandlet that gets the admin service, and we check that, start it. Then we go ahead and do a little error checking here, but basically what we're going to do is deactivate the feature. And you can see here, there's basically another commandlet here that does the disable feature, a couple of parameters. So you walk through, do the disable, we'll uninstall the solution. After that, here you can see the next bit, we get the solution, and then we call uninstall. Then we do a little bit of a sleep. We've got to wait for that to finish. Then we remove the solution completely, and then we're done. So now we've basically got a clean slate, and now we want to go ahead and add back the solution to our WSP file, basically. So you see here we did our add solution, and the solution path variable has the pointer to our WSP file, and then we deploy it out. So this is all done automatically. This is how you would definitely want to do it in the production environment. I'll also show you later in Visual Studio how we do it in the development environment. It's really easy and slick in Visual Studio as well. So that's pretty much it. That's the PowerShell deployment story. Very nice. So definitely a good piece of sample code there for you. Let me go into Project Center and show you what we just did. So cool thing is this is all deployed as a SharePoint solution. So it's all in the self-contained WSP file, which makes it real nice and easy for deployment scenarios. And what we've done when this thing had to restart IIS, when it comes back up, you'll see a change in the ribbon. If I'll point it out to you, I don't know how many people are familiar with 2010, but in the ribbon, what we've done is add a button on Project Center that allows us to go ahead and bulk edit the project. So that's sort of the starting point for this tool. So it's integrated right in to PWA, which is really slick. It's taking a while. Here we go. All right, so we're on the main page, PWA. I will navigate to Project Center. And you can see it's loading, but you'll notice here on our ribbon, we've got all the normal suspects up here, but there's something new. And here it is, bulk edit project. This is what we just added. This is the feature. So we've added this customization to the ribbon. If we go ahead and click that, we will get a new page, this bulk edit page. And as part of it, we're going to get this dialog come up that will ask us for some configuration parameters. And I'm going to walk through all this in the debugger in a few minutes, but I wanted to run through it without debugging just so you can see how the flow works. So what we're able to do here is two steps. I first select the fields that I want to make my bulk changes to on my projects, and these are all at the project level only, nothing else. Select the field, and then the next step, select filters. I will go over and basically set up some filtering that will sort of narrow down my projects that get returned as the data set here that I'm going to work on. So I have pretty good flexibility here as to both the types of projects and the data that I want to change. So for this little sample, I'm going to go ahead and change I'm going to select the probability of success score, custom field. Let's see where it's there it is. There's one. And then I want to get an indicator too, just so we can see what that looks like. So we'll get project cost as well. So those may not be the most likely ones that you would use in this scenario, but for the purposes of the demo, I think they're fine. So we've added our fields, and we have these other three: project name, start and finish date. Those are defaulted in there for us. We can take them out if we want to, but we'll just leave them in for now. So that's the first step. So the second step here is we're going to select some filters, and this is where we're going to filter down our project list. And I'm going to do just something, again, sort of unlikely but easy, and that will be by project name. So let's say we want to get all the projects that begin with the letter E. And if I wanted to combine conditions here, I can actually add more. So I can say and then I can have some other condition that I might want to further filter, and you can have a whole list of these conditions to refine the list. In this case, I'm just going to remove that. So we have that. Let's continue. So we've got our field selected and our filter set up. Now I hit continue, and we should get to see our grid here in a second. It's not valid. Why? There we go. Okay. So now you can see while this grid is loading, this is the JS grid I mentioned before, the JavaScript grid that is prevalent here now in PWA for 2010. You can see there's some additional ribbon customizations that we've done. So there's the select field filters. This button will basically take me back to that dialog box. If I click this, it takes me back to the dialog where I can reselect my criteria. I'm going to leave that. This button is great. As soon as I start selecting projects to be edited, that lights up. And I can, once I pick this now, this is going to throw me into the next step where I can basically do my editing. Right now, this grid is in read-only mode. Once I've done my editing, the Save button lights up, and I can actually save and commit my changes, which I'll make some PSI calls under the covers and make the changes, or I can cancel and just let it go. I also have refresh, and the reason we have a refresh button here is because these project updates that happen behind the scenes in this grid are all obviously queued, so they're not instantaneous. So as things go through, you can press the refresh button to see your status until everything completes. And then finally, this last button is the My Queue Job. So you basically, as this thing is running stuff in the queue, you can click this button. It'll pop up another window, and you can see what's going on with your queued job. So let's go ahead and edit. We'll just select all of them. So now we're going into edit mode. And now pretty much the same grid, but now it's editable. So I can come here and I'll change this to 27. And I'll do it for all of them so they're easy to see. One thing that would be nice here is to have a way to sort of select a column and have it paste a value into the entire thing. But anyway. There we go. And then I wanted to show you this. This is pretty cool too. So you'll notice here for project cost, this is an indicator custom field. So it's basically running out of a lookup table, and then it has a graphical indicator. You'll notice here on the right-hand side, there's a little pop-up here. And when I click that, it basically goes out and it knows by this field type that it has these three values that are possible values. And so it gives me the choice in this little drop-down to pick one. I'm going to make all these green just so we can see them. Okay, so now we've made our changes. And now we come back up here. We can either cancel this if we don't like it and get rid of it, or we can do a save. So we'll do a save. And then at this point, once we do a save, this information is basically going to be sent out through the PSI, updated in the queue, and then our projects will have the new data ready to go. So you can see here we've already got some see, this is this morning. Let's see. I'm going to wait on this until we're done here, just to let this load. So behind the scenes, what's happening here is basically going out to the grid, capturing that data that we've changed, packaging it up inside of our normal data sets that we use in the PSI, makes the update calls out to project server, and then this stuff gets queued up and then it processes. So this is done. You can see here now that these all the indicators are green and all these values are 27. So if we were in the middle of the queuing process, we could continue to hit refresh and see more of these things sort of display the changed values as it goes along. So let me go ahead. I'm going to go to server settings. I want to show you this in the queue jobs just to confirm for anybody that may not believe. Let me go ahead and show me all the successful queue jobs. And we should see, there's all the E projects. And you can see that we just, in the last minute or so, have run all these through the queue. So this is where the updates were. This is actually where the real work happened right here, this project update from PSI. So that's really, in a nutshell, what you're doing when you use that, the Solution Starter. Pretty cool. Great demo, and lots of new features in there that are interesting to play with. So let me go ahead and close this down, and I will open it up in Visual Studio. Already got it open. So what I'm going to do next, instead of jumping straight into debuggers, I wanted to do a quick pass through some of these interesting files over here, just so you have some idea what each of them do. I mean, I'm really hoping that the point of this webcast is to give you familiarity with, with this code, so that it gives you a jump start on using this yourself. So let's go ahead. The first few things here are sort of your standard SharePoint objects. I'm not going to worry too much about those service references and stuff like that. We'll skip over. Let's go right away into this field info. So this is really just a container class that's used basically to sort of normalize the field. So as you probably noticed, we have different types of fields. There's a project type field, there's custom fields, which are down at the PSI level are returned in different data sets. This field info sort of normalizes our field so that we can have all those in one list and provide that to the grid. So that's really all this is for. This is just sort of a data normalization class that helps, merge the things from different data sets that are really disparate. Next down here is global resources. So there's this resource file, which is interesting. It holds a bunch of strings, and these are the strings used in the dialog that you saw come up. So you'll notice down here you see it begins with, it contains these different values. These are the values that are pulled in and sort of constructed when that dialog is pulled up. So if you wanted to change anything in terms of textual values, this is the place where you'd do it. These other files are really just additional files that this project template uses, and they're not much to them, so we'll kind of gloss over those. Next ones we have here, the JS Grid, in the JS Grid folder. This first one, Data Adapter. So this is a class that retrieves and filters project information in the grid. So since you can see here, we'll start. Let me scroll this into the top first and we'll kind of come down. So there's some interesting stuff, and we'll step through this. You can see there's some breakpoints in here that we'll hit eventually. But so this is the place where you would basically do sort of your data retrieval, and you can see right here, this is actually the PSI data coming back in this DS project, this project data set. And we're actually calling a read project status, retrieving some data. So this is sort of the low-level stuff that gets pulled back through this adapter class. There's some other ones in here that do similar things, filling the table with values, that sort of thing. Good utilities. This class, sort of various utilities to format and manage the JavaScript data grid that we have, the JS Grid. So again, same sort of thing where we can go out and get columns and fields, different address different parts of the grid and format things. Indicator helper. This little file is basically used to figure out what the graphical indicator you saw in the project cost, and when I demoed the solution starter, that we have that colored graphic. This little piece of code helps figure out what that's supposed to be based on some rules for that particular indicator. The UID.cs class, this is really just used, it's really for a nice comparable interface. So it basically allows us to do comparisons on goods, just a utility class. Next we'll move down into the layouts folder under the bulk edit tool. And so there's a few interesting ones here. This bulk edit ASPX, this is the page that contains the grid. So this is sort of the main page that we saw when we saw the grid come up after we did our selection process to display all the different fields for the project. So that's where all this code is contained right here. Not much going on in that one. So in here, this is where some will, again, walk through this, but this is a place where when the page loads, we do things like initialize the ribbons. We go out and get all the resources that I showed you in the string resources and load it up in the dialog, and we do all the stuff like that to get this thing ready to go, and that's where most of the functions in here do. And they take care of basically sort of displaying the data in the page. And this is a pretty important one here, this get callback result method. Depending on what the command is here, this is really where all the work gets done, where you, depending on what things you've selected in the dialog, this will be called back, and this will go out and get the data, serialize it in JSON, and put it up in the grid and all that kind of stuff. So that's what's going on in here. This is a pretty important one to know about. Rich text editor. This is just a control, and to be honest with you, I don't even know where this is used. So I'm just going to gloss over that because I really don't know that it's that important. Next one here is select field filter. So this is basically the definition for the dialog box that pops up. And so in here you'll see again in the onload event and there's a few other methods in here. This is where some of these fields on that dialog get built and bound and all that sort of thing. And we'll walk through that in the debugger as well. So that's what goes on in that particular piece of code. So those bulk edit tool ones under the layouts are pretty important. And then here's under the INC file and under bulk edit tool, we have these JavaScript files. And these are also pretty important because these are sort of the guts behind what's going on in the grid. So we'll be walking through some of this stuff as well. And this is sort of low-level stuff to sort of manage what goes on in the grid. You can tell by some of the methods or the functions you see here what that's for. And then Grid Manager, this is probably the most important one. We'll definitely be hitting this when we hit some breakpoints. This is sort of the main guy that behind the scenes takes care of the grid and in the Java side. So there's some things in here where we, like for instance, just display projects data method. This one's really important to get called. It gets called all the time. This is actually where we take the data that comes in that's serialized and go ahead and display things in the grid and that sort of stuff. So we'll walk through that in detail in a minute, but that's an important one. So those are good to know about as well. The next one down under styles, under bulk edit tool, those are just, images and style sheets. Nothing really too special there. Resources, we've got another resource file here. And this one is, there's two of them in here. The first one I showed you was for that dialog box. This one covers the buttons on the ribbon. So one covers the stuff that's on the dialog box. This one covers what's in the ribbon. So this would be the place. I'm going to actually demo this when we're done walking through the code. I'm actually going to change some of this and show you how, make a real quick demo of how to do a ribbon customization. It's pretty neat stuff. So that's what's in this resource file. And then here we have the actual ribbon customization elements that we need to care about. So this XML file we're going to get into in a few minutes. This is actually where you make the customization, and this XML file really points back to the resource file to pull in the actual strings for the different labels and so forth. So I'm going to go in here and make a couple of simple changes to show you how this works. If you're interested more in ribbon customization, this stuff is all documented in the SDK. So that's also a good source to go play around with this stuff if you are so interested. And then finally, what I've already showed you so far is really, in effect, really most of the UI stuff. And the real guts of this thing is here really in the services section. And there are basically two of these, two services that we rely on. There's a field service, and we're making some PSI calls in here as well. In fact, here's one right here, setting up this view service, which is new. We go out and, when we say go out and get these project fields, we basically call this free portfolio fields and do some filtering and whatnot. But basically, that's where we return some of the data we use in this customization. This is also a place here where you can see where we go out and get read the custom fields that we are interested in. So that's an important thing to know about. And then likewise, the lookup table one, you saw in the indicator that we used the lookup table for the color for that project cost. So this thing has to be able to go out and find lookup values so that we can do things like that with the drop down in the grid. So these two service files are the ones that take care of that kind of work. So that really is that's a quick run through on the sort of what those files are for. Hopefully that was somewhat illuminating for you. Let me go ahead and make a quick change. Let me point out one thing first. When you're in Visual Studio, when you download these solutions, be sure you need to set this site URL property down here. Make sure you're pointing at the instance you want to work on. I believe it's either blank or it comes with localhost or something, localhost/PWA. In either case, it wasn't correct for me, so just be sure that that's right. Otherwise, when you try and deploy, you'll get an error. So let me go ahead. What I'm going to do here is make a quick change in the ribbon customization. I just wanted to get more in detail now with that. So let's come back in here, and I'll take a quick walk in detail through this file. You can see in here that there are these different definitions of things. So let me come down to the ones that we probably care the most about. What we really care about are these buttons, at least for customizing the ribbon. You can see here that we have this group under this Command UI definition right here. You can see we have this group, and it's called the Bulk Edit Tool group. So I don't know if you noticed when I brought it up, but that button is actually in a group, which means you could have more than one button in the group, and lots of the other buttons are already grouped that way. For this particular case, we just have one. But in any case, what I can control here declaratively, which is pretty cool, is I can declare this new group. I can sequence it. So with the sequence number, I can change its position in the ribbon. So for instance, if I change this to, I don't know, let's say 20, it's relative to what else is in the ribbon. That we'll see that button be moved over to the left towards the beginning. If I want to change the title, you can see right here, this is the pointer to the title back in the resource file. So let me go in and just change that, just for fun. Bulk Edit Projects, group title. So let's just put something in front that's kind of obvious. We'll save that. Come back here. So we didn't actually change anything in the elements file for that. We just changed it in the resource file. So that should change. Now within that group, you can see that we have these controls. And so we've got one button here, basically. And again, we have the same sort of idea where we have an ID. We have the sequence number. And in this case, there's only one button in the group, so this doesn't really change anything. But if you have multiple buttons, this is where you control the ordering. This is the command. So when the button is pressed, this is the command that gets fired off. And then here's the label text. So again, if I go back to the resource file and change this button label, let's just change this one as well. So I made some simple changes. What I'm going to do now is just run the debugger. And this is really awesome. All I have to do is just hit F5, and this thing will compile, deploy, and run. I don't have to do any attaching to processes. I don't have to do anything else. It's very easy, really nice. You can see down at the bottom left corner, it says adding solution. Let's see. Let me, I think I need to retract first since I had one. Let's try it again. Since I had one already deployed manually, I think I needed to retract first. There we go. Deploy succeeded. So it should fire up a browser for us, and we should be pointing at PWA. And if all went well, we should go to Project Center and see that the ribbon looks a little bit different than what it was when I ran through this before. So hopefully this will pop up here in a second. There we go. Always seems so much slower when I'm demoing it. There we go. So we're back to our main page in PWA. If I go to Project Center, I'm hoping we're going to see a different ribbon. And there it is. You notice before, the button was out here on the very far right. Now, because I changed the sequence number of the group, it's back over here. And obviously, this group's sequence is less than 20, and this group's is more. So this got put in. You can also see that the titles changed. I changed them in that resource file to Mike and Mike, and you can see that they've changed as well. So that's a pretty quick introduction to PWA ribbon customization, but pretty easy to do, really. Let me go ahead and change these back. I'm going to just shut this guy off. Okay. And then I'll change this guy back to, I think it was 100, I hope. And then let's start the debugger again. And now we'll start to walk through the debugger now and take a little closer look at what's going on in here. And I need to get on to the next piece. Already time's flying by. So while I'm in here, I'm going to also go here and I'm going to enable my breakpoints so that we can see some things happen. Some of this stuff. Okay. So we'll go back into Project Center. And you can see my button is back to where it was before, just from those quick changes. So let's go ahead and hit this button and see what we hit in the debugger. So you see here right away what happens is we hit the debugger. This custom page of ours, this bulk edit ASPX page gets loaded. And of course, right here in the onload, we're going to initialize the ribbon. We're going to load, you can see we're going to load some resources. These are actually the resources out of that first resource table to enumerate. We're going to enumerate through and add the resources here so that we can add those to build the drop-downs that we need in the dialog. That's what's going on here. And then we're setting some other, and then finally here for this initialization object, we're just basically adding the different parameters to this object so that we can then pass the stuff into the grid. So let me go ahead and hit F5 on this. So what's going on? So now you notice we went to the ASPX code behind. Now we're in Grid Manager, and we're in JavaScript. So this is the initialization function. This is the data that was passed in. So let me clear some of this off here quickly. Too much stuff. Okay. Not much to see there. There's the control. This is the initialization data. Empty and property. And this is the stuff that we pass this stuff in. If you recall, we have this list of resources. This is our URL for PWA, and then this is a callback that we needed as well for what we have to go to display projects. So this is the setup now in the JavaScript side. So you can see here we're just registering a bunch of stuff. Nothing too exciting here so far. A bunch of setup. I wanted to point out too that in my version of the code, and I believe that's what's up on MSDN, this threw an assertion, and what it needed was this title needed to be set. There was no title property. So if you run into that assertion, just add this title property in your code, and you'll be fine. So we're getting some more setup here. To set up these filters. So here's where we actually start to bring up that dialog that comes up on top of the ASPX page. And you can see here the first thing we do, so we've gone now into this ASPX page for our dialog, the select fields and filters ASPX page, right? So we run with elevated privilege. That way we can call over to project server and make the call and get the data back. And we're going to call this field service, which I showed you. This is one of the places where we go out and actually do the low-level PSI calls and pull back the data. So that's what's going on here. So now we've gone off into the field service, into this, and this is pretty much sort of the bread and butter of how this stuff gets data. So we call this view PSI. It's going to read us all these fields that we need. I'm going to take a second because there's a lot of them. Now we have it in this data set. And now, as I mentioned before, I showed you that construct up there, the psfieldinfo.cs file, that basically was just sort of a class definition. This is where we take stuff out of the data set that we've retrieved and sort of normalize it into those psfieldinfo objects so that it makes it easier for us to use. So that's what's going on here. It's just doing a little transforming. It adds this description field, does some other things, and then it also fills in the custom field information we need. So at the end of this, we basically return this field info list, and you can see it has 468 fields. So we've made a couple PSI calls, kind of brought it all together, and now we're ready to do something with it. So we have that. Now we're going to go ahead and bind the field, right? So we go down inside this code, and this is this item swapper field is a control that sits on top of that dialog. And I don't know if I should have showed it, I guess, but you can switch between the select fields and the filter projects. Well, that's the swapper. So there's two parts to it. The A part is the field selection, and the B part is the conditions for selecting projects. So that's what's kind of getting built here. You can see here it's getting some text out of the resource files, setting some other properties. Now we're building this data set that has some of the stuff we need that we're going to be displaying in these two parts of this dialog box. So we just cloned it. We have two data sets now, which have basically the same structure. We're going to build this whole list of these project fields, right? The ones that we just selected, that we're going to select from. And then, so let me just go ahead and F5 through this because this will take forever. So we hit that. So that's going to build that list. And then the second list is these are the selected fields. And then finally, we just set these two data sources on these two data sets for these swapper fields, basically. So let's kind of run through past that. And then we're going to bind up these fields. So this is the list of fields we used for filtering. So for instance, let me just show you. You can see here, this is a list of fields. It's going to basically just go through that entire list and add those items to this drop down. So it starts off with percent complete, and there's a whole bunch more, 468. So there you are. So you can see we just built these lists from that code I just went through. So let's go ahead and pick our we'll just pick our same field that we did before. Keep it consistent, I guess. And you can see here, this is the item swapper. So if I click on that link, see how it swaps? It's basically just, you know, hiding and showing a bunch of different fields. Kind of cool. All right. So what were they? It was probability of success, and it was project cost. So we continue. Now we go to the next one, and we want to go to project name. Okay, so we just did all of our filtering. We hit continue. Now we come back into our grid manager because now the grid says, hey, I got all the information I need. Now I got to go out and figure out what stuff to show here. So we hit this bind. We do our bind.js grid. We build the serializer. So in JavaScript, you have to serialize stuff as JSON, right? It's a little different. It's sort of XML-ish, but it's JavaScript specific. Anyway, so all the data, when it's going back and forth to and from the grid, has to be serialized and deserialized in JSON in order for it to do its thing. So we have this callback here, and we have to sort of decipher what is it we're trying to show, and based upon what that command is, we do certain things. So in this case, the command is show project. So we're going to take all this information here that we have, and we're going to call this get project field, which will go out again. Let me take this off because we've already looked at this, and get our field. And then we're going to basically turn this thing into JSON, right? So that's what we did. Up here we did get project field. We sort of looked here to figure out what our selected fields are that we need to show in the grid. And we go out here and get the information for those particular fields that we needed. And then we get this data, which we're not good. Now we go into this data adapter, which we looked at before. So this is actually where we're going to go out now and retrieve some stuff. So we just built this data table. Let me get off of that. So what we're doing here is we're building some information. You can see what we're doing is from the field information, we're extracting the columns to figure out what columns to add in the table. So that's what's going on there. And now we've got our project data set. You can see here we're actually making the PSI call right here. This PSI context is in this PJ context. We don't have to build a proxy or do anything else that's already there for us, so that's pretty cool. So we go out and read project status on the project. And then basically what we're doing is looping through this data set that comes back from PSI that has all the project information. And so we skip it if it's not been selected. We make a new row in our table. And then basically fill in the table with the information. So this is actually where the actual data gets dumped into the data gets pulled out to get dumped into the grid. So this is a pretty key thing as well. So here's our read. We don't really, that's just a PSI call. Let's skip through that. And now here's where the fill is going to happen. So we have the data set. And here's a a little more filtering that's been encapsulated here, so we'll just kind of skip through this. Because this basically tells us based upon our selection criteria, should this thing be included or not. And you can see here what it does is it goes through these filters. So I showed you the second part of that selection on the dialog box where you can pick the conditions to sort or to filter your project. That's where these are enumerated right here. So basically it's going through each of the filters, getting the filter out, and it's constructing this condition and testing if we should be included or not, and then it returns a Boolean true or false. So that's what's going on there. So in this case, we didn't meet the filter criteria, so we just go on. So I'm going to go ahead and F5 it. And back to our fill data table. We've already got a breakdown there, so let's go back. There we go. So now we're in one where we have to actually fill. So we're going through our custom field rows. And I'm just going to skip over this, but basically this is where we're constructing additional information about if it's a custom field or not. You can see if it's not a multi-value, then we just show the data, but otherwise we have that drop down, and so that's where this gets decided. And then we have our native field here. Let's get past this. So you can see here we're doing some filtering here in link. Checking what kind of looking for the first task, if it's a summary, getting certain information here, and then we're going to basically loop through our field info and setting up these new rows here based upon certain conditions, as you can see. So basically, the fill data table with our projects is kind of where a lot of the real work is happening as well. Let's just go ahead and skip down to that. There you go. So if it comes back true, we go ahead and add that row to the table, right? Anything interesting to see there? Not really. Okay. So anyway, our data table is getting filled now with our filtering criteria, which is what happened there. So I'm going to skip down past this. And at the end of the day, we're going to have this table, basically, that's going to be filled with our information that we need. Okay, let me just break off. So now the grid's basically getting constructed and loaded here. All right, take that one off. Here's our indicator rule. So this is the place where it figures out what graphical indicator is displayed depending on certain rules and values. Let's see. Hit a break here. See what happens. So you can see there's the operand is green. So that was the textual value that we put in, if you remember. That came out of the list. Now we're going to test the operator, right? So we're saying if it equals something, then we return this value. Let's see what this looks like. The result value is what we want, right? 1. So now that's going to basically map back to, 1, 2, or 3, which will tell us which of those indicators should be displayed. So that's what's going on here with the indicator class that I showed you. It's just a way to calculate which graphic to show. So let's take the break off here. And you can see here's a rule. You can see what green is 1, red is 3, yellow is 2. So that's pretty much what's happening in that guy. Now we're back in Grid Manager in our display projects data. This is the guy that actually takes the data. And if you take a look here, you can see this data. This is JSON data, right? So it looks, well, it doesn't look like XML, but it kind of does if you didn't have to look at it that way. But anyway, that's pretty much what it is. It's just all the data encapsulated in JSON. Gets passed into this function in JavaScript. And then we basically go through and set all this stuff up again. Turn on some parameters here. Go past this. And then we go ahead down here and display things. So here we're going to loop through the records. We're going to get data values. We're checking here if it's editable. We check the selection manager, so that's going out and checking if it's been checked in the checkbox. You can see right here. And then if it's editable, we add some stuff to this header. And so if the project's, if you've checked it, but it's been checked out by another user, we can't obviously make any changes to it. So in this place, you'll get warned that, hey, I believe there's a bitmap that pops up that'll show you, hey, you can't use this one, it's already being used. Anyway, so here's get all records. And then let's go down into this guy, process command context. So this is where after we do the work, this guy's going to check the queue and see what the status is on the jobs and update what's going on. So I don't know if you remember, after we hit save, it goes out and tells us project is updating or it's completed or basically the status. That's using the PSI, the queue service, to go out and tell basically did it work? Did the job fail? You can see here in this condition it would fail, and update something in the grid. So that's what's basically happening here with this routine. And then there we go. So that's again what we had before. This is the final thing. So if we went ahead and let's go ahead and just change something here. You can see here when we hit the edit button, we got thrown into this edit selected projects function. So this is another one, the good one to put breakpoints into trap and see what's going on. So we basically clear all the errors out. We go back into that bind method that we just went through, set everything up again. Here we are inside bind, and we basically call our callback script. Now we're in edit, right? Because we hit the edit button up there, so we have a different command. We go out and get the JSON again. Go through that whole process again. So let me just get through this. I'm going to turn some of these breakpoints off. It's hitting too many. Anyway, so it's the same track, and then as you hit different buttons, you're going to go into that switch statement, and different commands will execute a little bit different code. You can see here it just displayed, this is the only one that we had checked, so this is the only one that matched. So we can go ahead and edit this one. Let's go ahead and cancel this. You can see that there's the handler for cancel edit. Doesn't do much. Just going to go back and refresh things. Anyway, I think I'm going to stop at this point. We're already at an hour, and I have another one to go through. So let's leave it at that. I hope that gave you enough of a starting point, at least, to get going on this yourself and take a look at it. Look into some of these files and put some breakpoints and make some changes. So that's basically really what's going on, though. and that it's all done in this JavaScript grid, which is really, really nice. It does a great job on this. Anyway, I am going to close that down, and I'll move over to the next step. Let me go back just for a second to the slide. Okay. There it is. So we're going to go now into the bulk import tool, which is similar. It's actually going to show up on the same ribbon as this one did. So this is a little bit different tool, though. Instead of bulk editing existing projects, what this allows me to do is point to a SharePoint list and basically extract fields that are in that list and create projects out of those. So again, not knowing what the experience level is out there, but it's a pretty common thing that people want to do some kind of preliminary sort of project idea tracking in lists in SharePoint. A lot of people do that. At some point, they might want to take a tool like this and say, hey, I want to turn it into a project. How do I get it out of this list with all these different items? This is the tool that does it, and it works in a very similar way to what we just saw with the bulk edit tool. It has its own CWA customization, and it uses PSIs to do, well, not really update project, creates project data. So a little simpler than the other one, but somewhat similar in some of the concepts. So let me switch back. We'll go into that guy in code real quick, walk through it. Okay. So this time, instead of deploying with PowerShell, I'm just going to show you. I'll just do it here just to show you what it looks like. I think I already did, but we'll do it again. Do a deploy. And again, you can see down here, deploy succeed. It's all completely done with from Visual Studio. Super easy. I actually put this one over on a different instance, PWA2. So let's go over there. There's two. Let's go to Project Center, same place. And you'll notice we have another button. And this can coexist with the other one. They both can be on the same bar. It's fine. I'm just using a different instance for different reasons. But so this is what shows up. So when I click on this guy, and I get another dialog coming up, and this guy's going to allow me to basically go out and pick a list. In fact, I need to go create the list first before we do this. So let me just shut this guy off. Let's go down here to list. I'm going to create my list real fast. I should have done it ahead of time. I'll just put a couple project items in there and make it pretty simple. Let's create a list. Custom list, and we'll call it new projects. Create it. So you see here it's been created. And I wanted to point out also that on your list you see this bulk import tool configuration data. This is a list that gets deployed when you deploy the feature. This is automatically installed, and I'll show you this when the tool comes up. But basically, you can save your configurations, so you can have different configurations, different fields, and so forth that you map to, and you can save those in this list, and that's what it's been built for. So I'll show that in a minute. But that's something that was automatically added. I didn't do it. Okay, so we're in a new project. Let's go here and just add some columns. So we have title already. Let's go business need. Let's make it text. We'll do a proposed start date. Make it a date field. And one more. We'll do propose finish. Make it a date field as well. Okay. Let's go back to the list. There they are. Let's add a couple. We'll call it Project A. Business need. I don't know. We'll make up something strategic. 60 days. Let's just add one more. More days. Okay, fine. Okay, good. So let's go back. We'll go back in the Project Center. Now we've got our list set up. So that would be our list that we've been gathering project ideas for the last 6 months. Now we want to turn some into projects. So the first thing we do now, we hit the button. We get this custom dialog that comes up, similar to what you saw in the other tool. We need to put in the URL to our project server instance. So in this case, I'm using 2. So we got to hit validate. And what that should do is go out, connect, and then it looks at this SharePoint site and looks for lists. So you can see here what it's done is gone out and populated this list of all the lists that it found. And you can see here, here's the new projects one that I just put in. It lets me filter by views. I should have added another view there to limit it more. So you'll see all the views that have been created for that list, and you can pick. And based upon what the view has in it, it'll change these column mappings down here. So what we're doing now in the column mappings is, in the SharePoint column, we have title, and we're going to match it to the title field in project. Business need, we have to choose. It doesn't know what that should be, so we'll say sample business need. Proposed start date, we will go to sample proposed start date. And then finally, we'll do same for the finish date. Right, so there's the mapping. Now we want to tell it when we import these projects, what enterprise project template should it be mapped to? So we've got all these predefined already. We'll just say basic project plan, fine. We'll publish the projects when this is checked. As it goes through and imports, it'll actually not only save it, but then publish them, so it'll be visible. And then finally, this is where we save the configuration to, and we'll just call it Mike's configuration. It's going to save it to that bulk import list that I showed you earlier. So I'll go back and show you that in a minute. So let's start the import process. And this is going to do some of the same things we saw before. It actually goes out and makes some queued calls to TSI. You see here we're getting updates back. We're actually going out and looking at the queue service to see what's our status. We're still doing things out in the queue. And this should come back. There we go. So it just did 2 out of 2. We're done. And we should now, if we refresh, we should see the 2 projects here in Project Center. There they are. And take a quick look in the Managed Queue jobs. You can see that Project A and B right here. We're waiting for the reporting. If I look at success, you'll see that it already created it's already done the creation process, so that's been done. There we go, create. There's all the A/B stuff. So it all happens in PSI, as we would expect. Okay. Let me show you one other thing on the list here. So let's go back to the bulk import. You noticed I saved my configuration. It's kind of ugly. But here's the name, Mike's, and it saves it as this gigantic XML. I guess you could filter and turn that off if you don't like to look at it, but that's pretty much what it's actually saving. And it'll re-import. So if we bring this up again, we can pull this configuration back up. I'll just show you that real quick. It'll only take a second. So if I pull this back up, you can see here now I can pick, it detects that there's something in the list, so I can pick Mike's, and it has all the information for me. I don't have to type anything again. So that saves all the time. It's nice. Okay. So let's shut this guy down, take our quick stroll through the code here. Nice thing is it's pretty much the same model. The same guys wrote this code that wrote the other one, so it's somewhat structured the same, which is nice for consistency reasons and nothing else. So here in the data scheme folder, these are just different. There's a content type, a list type, and a list instance. These get deployed, when the feature gets deployed, for instance, this is that list that gets created. I showed you where the configuration is stored. This is what defines it. So that's what this stuff is. It's just some things that get deployed for us automatically when the feature goes. PSI helper. This is really a way just to spin through the errors, any errors that come back, because they can be, you could have something nested or whatever, but this will basically, you can see, go through and loop through coalesce and get all the errors and log them for us at one time so we can see what's going on. So it just manages that. Images folder just has a couple button images that we use. This import configuration data context, this is really just a wrapper for that context information. That's what this is used for, just to wrap that, and then it gets serialized out in that XML. Layouts folder, this is some of the good stuff like in the other one. So we have basically just the one dialog, the bulk import dialog, which is defined here with bulk import.aspx, and structured somewhat in the same way, as far as you have this main method here that you get a command and it figures out, based upon what you're trying to do, what stuff it needs to go retrieve. So it goes out and gets the list, or it gets views, or it gets columns as you select things. And these different commands get called back into this function, and the data gets retrieved and it gets displayed. So that's, in essence, what's going on here. We'll hit that in the debugger when we fire this guy up. Let me enable these. Okay, so that's what that guy is. Pretty much the same thing here. We have this little bit of JavaScript for the import dialog. So, for instance, again, some of the button handlers in the screen here, when we hit the validate button, we're going to hit this breakpoint. There's some other ones down here where we handle some of the other things that happen, loading the list, those types of things. We'll hit those within the breakpoint. Like that one here. So really, this is just the code that's managing sort of the functionality of that little pop-up that's in JavaScript. So that's what's going on in this guy. Styles, that's the style sheet. Nothing too special there. These models, these are basically more just container-type classes, similar to what you saw with the PS field info and the other examples. The same type of thing, with sort of a normalized way to build my own list of my own information. That's all that's really going on with these guys. They're just these guys that we can use in collections. They have a field info one too, just very similar, just to store these different types of data that come back. Resources, we have the same kind of idea. Should have a bunch of, actually just one string for the button label on the ribbon, and then this guy has basically the same thing. This one's just localized, I guess. So it's just one for the button. So they're consistent, but there's not much going on there. Here's our ribbon customization, like I showed you before. Same concept. This one's a little more interesting. Well, actually, the other one's more interesting because it has more buttons. This one is just the one, but it's the same idea where you can basically change the text and the position and all the other things with this XML file. Pretty nice. And then finally, we have the services folder, and this is really where most of the sort of real work happens. So the import configuration service, this is the guy that goes out, reads. Basically, when I select a configuration, it goes out and reads that list, grabs the XML file, brings it back, and basically uses that to populate the fields in that dialog box for me. The import service, these are the actual methods that'll import stuff into Project Server. So you can see here, actually, here's the do import. This is actually where the real import happens, and we'll step through that in debugger pretty quick. Logging service. This guy just takes care of logging our error messages, basically. And this particular app goes to the event log. The other app did not use the event log. It wrote to a list, I believe, a SharePoint list, a little bit different. PS Data Service. So this is one we use. This goes out and also retrieves a bunch of project server data, custom fields, project fields, EPTs, a bunch of workflow stuff. We'll hit this in the debugger as well. So this is a core service you need to take a look at. Queue service, this is the one where we can go out and basically read our status on our job. So here, wait for queue. If you've looked in the SDK, you see this stuff. It's in like Project Tool and it's used elsewhere, but this is basically some sort of cookie cutter code that allows me to go out and see what my status is in my jobs and manage things based upon the status. And then finally, FP Data Service. This is one that's more geared towards retrieving SharePoint list information. So instead of PSI, this actually is using the SharePoint API. And this just returns me a list of stuff, depending on, and we'll hit that in the debugger. I'm getting pretty short on time here, so let's fire this guy up. Might fail. Let's see. That worked. Good. So while we're waiting for this to load, I'll throw a reminder out there. We have today's the first in 4 of our webcasts on the sort of the internals of these solution starters. The next one is Thursday, 2 days from now, same time. Another one next Tuesday, and then the last of 4 is next Thursday. And they're all at 12 o'clock Pacific time. Okay, so we're back in PWA. Let's go off the Project Center. You see we have our projects. You know, I'm going to remove those so that we don't, because if we run through this in debugger again, it's going to fail because they already exist. So let's get rid of those real quick. Okay. Go back to Project Center. They should be gone. All right, so let's import again. This time we should be in the debugger. There we go. So here's our bulk import ASPX page. We're in the initialize function here. So we've come through. First thing we want to do is get the drop-down list for the EPTs. So we do that, build it here. Now we've jumped over. We're going to get some project server data, right? So we're going to initiate or instantiate a service object here for PS Data Service. We'll go out. We'll make this is basically doing a PSI call, getting the EPTs from project server. It's getting the project fields here. That'll take a second. And you can see here's our custom field. So we basically, here's the PSI call right here. We've read the custom field by entity. So these are the project ones, obviously. And then we do a little filtering and return the list of the fields. So there's our custom field. Now we're going to use the WebView service to go out and get the other project fields we need. And we're also going to add this description field. So we've gotten all these fields, and we're again normalizing. We're going out and getting these different fields from different data sets, different sources. We're basically normalizing. You can see here what we're doing is going through these lists that come back, and we're creating these new PS field info objects. So each field that comes back in these different data sets winds up in that, again, same concept. One list, one mega list with all the fields that we need, custom fields, project fields, what have you. So that's basically what's going on here. So we build our list. So now we've got our custom fields, and then we've got mappings, right? So we have that list in the middle of the dialog, if you remember, where we map between a list field and a project field. So we get that information. And then we're basically going to return all that information here in this object, this project server data object. Let's go through that. And we're going to, this is also where we go out now and get that import, that XML that you saw, I showed you in the bulk edit list. That's where it's coming from right here. This retrieves it, returns it to us. You can see here we use that, and we basically reset up we're going to reset up our dialog with this information. So that's what we're doing there. Right, so those are all the items that we wanted to get the list of whatever's in the list, basically. So let's go ahead and do this. So we can see here we hit our validate function, which is going to take us down to, this is where we actually load all of the lists. This is what, in JavaScript, this is where all the, you can see here the views, all this initialization for that dialog takes place here. So we're going to get that Ajax data. First thing we hit is the site list command. And you can see here, we're going to go through and build that list based upon the URL we just put in. It's going to build the site list, right? So that's what's going on here. We get the site list. Let's turn these guys off. Now we're loading the views. You can see here from our on the Java side of things, we're basically building that list of the views, which we only had one, but that's what's going on there. And then finally, list views. So this is where we go out. This is actually down in the SP data service. So now we're actually going out and getting the making the calls using the SharePoint APIs to go out and get the list based upon the views of the list that we selected based upon our selection in that drop down. Let's go ahead and just go through that. And then the final one here, the final command is column. So now that we've gotten the view, now we know which columns to get. So without grinding this out too much more, that's pretty much what's going to happen there, right? So these first three commands you see here, the site list, the list views, and these view columns are all things that happen ahead of time to pretty much build the content in the dialog, and basically making calls down to those services that we looked at to show us the dialog. So let me turn some of these off. And there's the columns coming back. So that's what we've got, right? You can see those. Turn some of these off too. So what I want to do is get this to the point where, in fact, okay. Let's just run through this again. I just want to show you what happens on import, and then I think we are pretty much at the end of this. I think fairly obvious what's going on. Business needs. Proposed. Sample proposed start. Sample proposed finish. Let's go again with basic. And so now you can see the final command here in this main. This guy kind of does a lot of work, this get Ajax data. When I hit the import button, this guy gets called. And this is where he actually goes out now. He serializes, you see here, he serializes the data, he basically extracts the stuff out of the grid, gets the configuration information, saves it if we want to, sets up some of these services he needs, and then we basically call the do import right here, where that's where the real work is happening. Now we're well, this is where it just saves the configuration. I'm just going to skip past that. That's pretty straightforward. Let's get to the import. Okay, so let's get back to this. Okay, there's my do import. So we're going to do this initial creation right here where you can see here we create the project. And this is in the import service. Anyway, so you see what it'll do is go through here, basically go through our data and build the stuff it needs to create projects. And you can see right here on the highlight, that's what this guy's actually going to do the real work. So that's where stuff kind of gets kicked off. And so now we're retrieving a bunch of fields that we need. And now you can see now it's been kicked off, and so now we're basically polling to see when this guy gets more information. So now we get called on do import again. We go back down through this guy, but this time we skip this part. We've already done the creation part, so we don't need that. Now we're going to be actually in the part where we check status, right? So that's what this rest of this code does. It's pretty much looping through the projects, checking the status, basically using the queue service, see what's going on, report the final status back up in the grid. That's all happening right here. And yep, here's our update status. So this is where we go out and get that status. And there we go. So now we've completed. So one last time through, I believe. Now that everything's updated, and then it should stop. Also, one more. It should stop here in a second. And those will be created again. There we go. Done. So the process is finished. So that's a pretty quick run through. We're almost out of time. Well, but I would encourage everybody. These are some great sample code. They did a good job writing. There's some great sample code in there. I encourage everybody to download these up on MSDN and try them out. Step in debugger. Hopefully, I got you a little bit of a head start there, knowing what stuff is used for what things. Let's see. I think we have some important links. Let's go to those. Kind of wrap this up. I don't know if we had any questions. Take a look at that in a minute. So here's some resources. This is the Solution Starter link that has actually there's a couple different things. There'll be some documentation pushed up there in the next week or so. Right now it has a deploy only for binaries, and then it also has all the source code at this site. You can download those now if you like. Some related webcasts that were done last week that are recorded, these two. They're more on the functional side of what I showed you here. They don't go into code at all, but some of the program managers and product group did these, and they did a great job demoing, so those are interesting. There's some other interesting links that might be useful for you. Demo image, some good blogs, that type of thing. So now we're at the question and answers. Bennett, is there anything else? Did you want to jump back in here for a minute, Bennett?
Yes, thanks, Mike. And before we do questions, we do have a quick survey slide that I'd like to put up at this time. And you should, ladies and gentlemen, you should see a survey slide up on the main slide window in Live Meeting, and you can fill that out directly in the main slide window there. All right, and that's it, and I'll hand it back to Mike.
Okay, thanks. So that wraps it up. I think we've covered, to give you, I think, a pretty good walkthrough on the URL on the Solution Starters, at least the first two. We'll have a similar type of event going on Thursday, and then Tuesday, Thursday next week, covering different Solution Starters. Please go out and download these. play around. They're really good, really interesting. I think you'll enjoy it, and they'll be very useful for your customers. Thank you for attending today, and I hope to see everybody back on Thursday. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks so much, Mike. And also thanks to everyone in the audience for attending. And ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude today's event. You may now disconnect.